Late today. Okay, let's begin. We are right at the end of page 55A. 55A, right at the end. Um, Yesterday we had reviewed the previous Gemara and we brought the second proof about Rav against, I should say, the second proof against the statement and the opinion of Rav Acha that when you have two musafs, you have to blow the trumpets for each musaf its own blowing. And the Gemara proved that wrong twice. Yesterday we explained possibly why the Gemara needs two proofs to prove him wrong. Isn't one proof enough? And the Gemara, we explained either because he also had a brisa that he was quoting. So because of that, just because we bring a brisa, that's not necessarily proving him wrong because he also has a brisa. But then when we brought two brisas, that gave it much more strength to say there must be some mistake with the brisa that he's quoting. Either he's not quoting it right, or his explaining it is incorrect, and so on. Another understanding was that Rav Acha had 2 points that he was making. Number one, that the musafs, that when you have two musafs, so each one has its own blowing of trumpets. 9 blowings for this musaf, 9 blowings for that musaf. So, for example, if it's Rosh Chodesh and it's Shabbos, you get 18 blows of trumpets for the musafs. And additionally, he was saying that each one has its own song. You have the musaf of Shabbos song, and you have the musaf of Rosh Chodesh song. And it really goes hand in hand because the trumpets were blasted during the song. The song was divided into 3 parts. The trumpets, the 9 blows were divided into threes, a series of 3 series of 3. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Tarat refers to tekiah, teruah, tekiah. And so the fact that he said that you need to have each musaf gets its own blowing was also saying that each musaf has its own song. And when we proved Rav Acha wrong, what we actually were saying was, number one, each musaf does not have its own blowings. And number two, each musaf does not have its own song. So in other words, the 2 proofs against Rav Acha were corresponding to each of these points that he was making in his innovative ruling. And so that's why the Gemara brought 2 proofs. And we concluded those 2 proofs already and reviewed that. And what we're up to really is the end of that state of that second proof. There was a little extra point that was mentioned there that wasn't applicable really for the main flow of the Gemara. But nevertheless, we'll just go over it. So it says Rav Safra, he made a siman, a sign of what was the order of the songs. And Rav Safra said the order of the songs, if you want to make a way of remembering it, some type of a code that will help you remember it, the code would be Humbahi. Humbahi, which the Hey stands for Havul Hashem B'nei Elim, and the Vav is Velarasha Amar Alikim, the Mem is Mi Yakum Li Imerayim, the base is Bino Bayarim Ba'am, the next Hey is Hasiroisi Miseval Shichmai, and the Yud is Yimoitu Kol Moiste Aretz. So that is if you think of that word, Humbahi, then you know that that's the order of each day from the first day of Chol HaMoed to the 6th day of Chol HaMoed. Those were the songs. Humbahi is the order. Rav Papa argued on that order. And Rav Papa said that the 4th day and the 5th day were actually interchanged. They were they were mixed up. They were substituted wrongly, meaning you have to switch the fourth and the fifth day. So instead of hum bahi, Rav Papa says it should be hum habi, not hum bahi, hum habi. So hum habi is Rav Papa's way, and basically it's the same. Everything is the same except the fourth and the fifth. If the base is before the hay or the hay is before the base, which it means basically bino bayarim ba'am and hasiroisi miseval shichmam are the argument of which one comes first. Now the Gemara then says, okay, so now we know that there's two question of what the order is, Rav Safra and Rav Papa. And how did we remember which one is which? So the Gemara says, well, that you have another code to remember that, and that's called Ambuha de Safri. Ambuha de Safri means some type of means that there would be groups of people that would walk on this road, on this this type of path, like a road for or a courtyard, more like a road. Groups of people will walk on the road that the teacher of the teacher of the students, the teacher, the parents would bring their children. So I guess that's what the road was called, Ambuha de Safri. So basically, I guess it was a common word. So if you wanted to remember what Rav Safra held, it was similar to the word Ambuha, because he holds it's Humbahi. And both of these words, you have the base before the hay. So you would know that Rav Safra is the one who holds that it's the base before the hay, and it must be Rav Papa is the other one who holds the hay is before the base. And that's the order of the six final days of Sukkot, of the song that was sang during the Musaf, service. And then the blowings of the trumpets would be part of, would go along that song. And so that was the during the libation of that, while the wine was being poured. And during that, they sang the song and they divided it into three, and they would blow the trumpets during those three divisions. Now, the Gemara then said, Tiyuvta, the Rav Acha Bar Chanina, Tiyuvta, we have now proven wrong the statement of Rav Acha Bar Chanina. We have proven it wrong. And now comes the new Gemara. And the new Gemara will write at the end of page 55a, and oh no, one second. There's one more little piece here that we said we learned yesterday. The Gemara asked, okay, Rav Acha is wrong, but what about the fact that he did bring a brisa and he brought a pasuk for it? How do we translate the brisa differently? What do we do with that? He brought a brisa and he explained it his way, which we've now proven wrong. But the fact is, there is a brisa, there is the source that we want to reconcile, figure out how to explain it. So the Ravina says that the meaning of the brisa had said the Hebrew words of hakol lafi hamusafin toikin, which means everything goes by the musaf. The blowings go by according to the musaf. He initially, Rav Acha wanted to say it means each musaf gets its own blowings, but we just concluded that can't be the meaning. So what is the meaning of everything that the blowings go according to the musafs? So the Ravina wants to say that it means you're ma'arichen b'tikiyos. When you have two musafs, the blowings go according to the musafs, means you have to extend those blowings, make them extra long so that they will last until you finish pouring the libations of both musafs. You're doing one song for two musafs, so make sure to in the blowings out for that. They're doing one set of blowings for that musaf, for both musafs, one set of blowings for both musafs. So make sure to make them longer than you normally would. Get the people who have a long breath, long-winded people that they can blow for a long time. Get those people and be Myrich in the Tekiyos, and this way it will last all the way until the end of the second pourings, the second Musaf pouring, and it'll be extended until then. The Rabbanon of Kesari, which I think it means Caesarea, the rabbis of Kesari, which I think it refers to Caesarea. They said in the name of Ravacha that this means that you're marbe betoikin, which means that not that you extend the blowings to blow longer, but it's hakol lafi hamusafin toikim. According to the musafs, that's how you blow. It means that when you have more than one musaf, you should add extra people to blow the trumpets, meaning have more trumpet blowers, because you want to, being that there's more than one musaf, so we honor it, so to speak. Instead of having 2 trumpets, you would have 10 trumpets, or however many more you would extend it to, but however many you want. But you could you add more blowers, more trumpeters, and you basically have more people blowing the trumpet when there's more than one musaf. So that's the rabbis of Kesari in the name of Rav Acha. I was wondering if this is the same Rav Acha as Rav Acha Bar Chanina, So in other words, we have like two statements in his name. One was that wrong understanding, and here, but maybe there's more than one Rav Acha. I have to look it up in the Art Scroll list to see if they have more than one Rav Acha.
So I guess we read about more than one.
Rebbe Acha. Yeah, they both say Rebbe Acha. But this one doesn't say Bar Chanina, so maybe that's a proof that there must be more than one. Normally, I guess Rav Acha Bar Chanina, they always say he's Bar Chanina, possibly.
I thought they were trying to support him and say we just were misinterpreting, but
we misquoted. We misquoted him, and this is really this is really his statement, right? Anyway, I have to take a look and see if anyone mentions that there's more than one Rav Acha, and we'll see. Okay, so now we're up to the new Gemara. So this is Va'anan, and it's on 55a, 4 lines up from the bottom, the last word on the line. Va'anan in us, the Islan Trey Yomi, us that have 2 days of Yom Tov, Heichi of Dinon, how do we do it? And this is a little maybe confusing part of the davening, because what happens is when you recite the Musaf of Sukkot, so each day we read about the sacrifice of that day. B'yom harishon, b'yom hasheni. We go through each of the days for the Torah reading of that day. And I wish I had a sitter over here. Let me just see if I could pull it up here.
But also Shmini Atzeres.
Yeah, and Shmini Atzeres. Well, 1 second. Let me pull it up here on. Maybe this should make it easier. Where is the reading? Is it in Pinchas or is it in Nasai?
No, it's in Pinchas only.
Yeah, it's Pinchas. Okay, let me pull it up. I'm gonna find it. 1 second. And let me pull it up on the computer so you could all see. Let's pull it up here. Let's see.
We read a pasuk and we also summarize all the things that go along with the pasuk, like the pouring of the libation and the flour that you have to bring along with the animals.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm not so you have the Nesiim's carbon sacrifices, which is also goes by each day. That's the confusing part. Okay, but yes, you're right. It's Pinchas. Okay, so it's let me share screen here. 1 second. Where am I here? Oh, let me share screen. Okay, now you'll see it. Okay, so the 15th day of the Chodesh Hashvi'i. So on the first day of Sukkot, which is the 15th day of the 7th month, so it mentions about not doing any work. It's a holiday, and you bring. Can everyone see this? Yeah. Is it
Yes.
big enough, David? Should I make it bigger? Like that. Okay. So it mentions about the sacrifices, and you bring how many bulls? 13. Parem b'nei bakar shloishaser, 2 elim, kvasim. You bring 14 sheep, 2 rams. So these are the and then you bring a mincha, and all the different the meal offerings and so on. And then there's also a chatos offering. We'll soon need to know this for 55b. It's actually good to look at this as well to know the amount of sacrifices that they would bring. Now that's on the first day of Sukkot, which is called the 15th day of the month. 15th day of Tishrei is the first day of Sukkot. Now comes the second day of Sukkot, and this the second day of Sukkot, and it calls it B'yom Hasheni. So in the second day, which is really the 16th day of Tishrei, so it mentions the 12 bulls. Again, the first day of Sukkot, we brought 13 bulls. That goes to 12, and then on the third day of Sukkot, it'll be 11, and then 10, and so on. So on the second day of Sukkot, it's 12 bulls, and then everything else stays the same. Elim, Shnayim, 2 rams, 14 sheep, and then you have the meal offerings and the drink offering.
But the chatos, also the chatos.
Chatos is verse 19. This is verse 18, talks about the meal offerings and the drink offerings. And then, as Jeffrey says, we have the chatos, korban chatos, which is in verse 19. And that would be for the second day. Now, on the third day, you got parim ashtei asar. Ashtei asar is an interesting word because it means 11. It's not very common. Ashtei asar elam shnayim kvasim and shana arba asar tmimim, and then you have everything else the same. So you have 11 parim, 11 bulls, and also that 1 chatos. Okay, besides the meal offerings and the wine offerings. Okay, now let's just think for a moment. When you daven musaf, so what do you say in the musaf offering? These are musaf means the extra additional sacrifices. And that's what we're reading about here in Parshas Pinchas. And it mentions here, go back to the beginning, right here. This is the beginning for Sukkot, the 15th day of the 7th month. 7th month is Tishrei. The 15th day is the first day of Sukkot. And you would bring these extra offerings called musaf. Now, now when we daven musaf, we are supposed to be reciting the karbanos, the sacrifices that they would bring in the Beis Hamikdash. So when you say the musaf on the first day of Sukkot, very nice. What you're saying is the musaf, you're including the sacrifices for the verse 12 here, B'chamisha asar yom l'chodesh hashvi, about this 15th day of the month. And what did they bring? The 13 bulls and the 2 rams and the 14 sheep and the 1 sin offering. And that was what you read on the first day of Sukkot. Now, if you live in Israel, what do you do on the second day of Sukkot? Well, on the second day of Sukkot, in your Musaf, you want to read what they would do in Eretz Yisrael, in the Beis HaMikdash on the second day. What would that be? Well, that would be verse 17 here about the second day of Sukkot. B'yom Hasheni, how many bulls would they bring? 12 bulls. Shnei Maser, 12 bulls. And that's what you read in Eretz Yisrael. Now, when you leave Israel and you celebrate 2 days of Yom Tov, that's where it becomes confusing. And what do you say outside of Israel on the second day of Sukkot? Do you say Uvayim Hasheni? Not really. Why not? Not really, not at all. Because it wouldn't be right on Yom Tov. You're calling this Yom Tov, right? You're celebrating the second day Yom Tov. It's 2 days Yom Tov Sheni. This is the second day Yom Tov. It's not right to call it the second day of Sukkot, which means Chol HaMoed, when you're celebrating Yom Tov. It's like a bizayon. It's a disgraceful to Yom Tov. It's a degrading the holiday to call it the Yom HaSheni. So therefore, why are we celebrating Yom Tov a second day? Because it's called the Sveika de Yoma. We think that it might be the first day. We're not 100% sure, at least initially when they established the extra day of Yom Tov was because of this suffix, of this doubt that it might be considered the first day. So on the believe it or not, on the second day of Sukkot, we say the same exact thing as we said on the first day, and that we leave it at that. What do we say on the second day of Sukkot? B'chamisha also, the 15th day of the month. It's really the 16th day of the month outside of Israel on the second day of Sukkot. And we're saying this, but that's because we are not sure. It might really be the 15th day of the month. It's the Sveika de Yoma. It's a doubtful what day it is. And because we used to be in doubt, we continue to respect that tradition and continue on with that tradition. And we call it, we say the Musaf, the 15th day, and we don't add on also the next B'yom Hasheni. We don't include the other option as well, that, well, it's a doubt, it might be considered the second day. No, it wouldn't be respectful to Yom Tov to do that. So we only do B'yom HaChamishi. We only do B'chamisha Asa Yom, B'chamisha Asa Yom, the 15th day of the month. Now comes Chol HaMoed, outside of Israel. In Israel, on this, this day of Chol HaMoed in Israel, which would be the third day of Sukkot, it would be the second day of Chol HaMoed in Israel. On that third day of Sukkot in Israel, they will say, we're going the next day, it's called B'yom HaShlishi. That's what they would say in their Musaf. In the Musaf, they would say B'yom HaShlishi. Now, outside of Israel, this is the first day of Chol HaMoed. On the first day of Chol HaMoed, now keep in mind, we never said of Yom HaSheni on the second day because it was Yom Tov, and it would have been disgraceful for Yom Tov to say of Yom HaSheni. So we were thinking that it might be the first day of Sukkot, and we said for the first day of Sukkot all the information that's applicable for the carbon of the Musaf of the first day of Sukkot, and therefore we never did the second day. And now it's the third day of Sukkot. It's the first day of Chol HaMoed, first day of the intermediate days of Sukkot, outside of Israel. So in truth, this is really the third day of Sukkot. However, there is that doubt that maybe it's really the second day. We have that tradition that we're supposed to consider the second day of Sukkot like might be the first day, the third day of Sukkot like it might be the second day. And so we're not sure if it's the second day or the third day. So outside of Israel, the question is, which one do you do? Do you do the second day, which we skipped? Or do we do the third day, which it really, and we know that it really is the third day of Sukkot now that we have a calendar and we're clear. So we do know that it really is the third day. So should we do the third day? Or should we do the second day? Because we skipped it. We never did the second day. And there is a doubt that it might be the second day. There is still that, we still have that tradition about that doubt. And therefore, maybe we should do the second day. So we're skipping something. And the Gemara brings this here because it is a little similar. And we're going to bring the brisa that we just brought regarding the songs of the sacrifices of the Musafs. And we spoke about what happens if Shabbos falls. And this we didn't review today, but we learned it yesterday. We reviewed it yesterday. That what happens if Shabbos falls on one of those days and you don't do the song of that musaf? What do you do the day after it? Do you go back to the song you missed? Or do you skip the one you missed and just do the new one on Sunday because Shabbos you didn't do the song? It was the Shabbos they missed out in the song of the musaf of that day of Sukkot because the Shabbos overrides it. And so Shabbos, we did the Shabbos song. So now what do you do about that whole order? Humbahi or Humhabi, right? We had that order of the verse of this of the Psalms that were recited on each day. So what do you do with the one you missed? Here we have a similar question, and we're going to bring that brisa to prove or to mention that it might be similar. So therefore the Gemara brings this over here and wants to know, what do you do for musaf? Now I mentioned that this is confusing, and the reason I mention it's confusing is because the Lubavitch Siddur mentions what we do in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, because the Lubavitch Siddur was made for the Jews in Russia and the Jews in America. Now, it turns out that when you go to Eretz Yisrael, you actually have to say something different than what the Siddur says. The Siddur tells you to do it one way, but in Eretz Yisrael, actually, you're supposed to do something else, because in Eretz Yisrael, the Musaf is not a Sveika D'Yoma. You don't have that questionable day. We know that on the, let's say the third day of Sukkot, which would be the second day of Chol HaMoed in Israel, it's you say for Yom HaShlishi. You'll say that day, the Yom HaShlishi, the third day of Sukkot. And then, in the fourth day of Sukkot, which would be the third day of Chol HaMoed in Israel, you do the fourth day. But outside of Israel is where the Siddur says what to do. But anyway, so it would always be a little confusing, because people who don't understand the logic behind it, and you're looking in the Siddur says to do this, but really, if you understand the logic in Eretz Yisrael, it's actually going to be different. And I think maybe in the new Siddurim, they probably corrected it to be able to be used in Israel. But the old Siddurim, they were basically printed with only the way it was read in Chutz La'aretz. And it's also confusing anyone that davens by heart. So they're used to saying one thing, and then they go to Eretz Yisrael, or if you're from Eretz Yisrael and you're used to doing the way in Eretz Yisrael, and you come to America, you have to change the Musaf prayers are a little different. You have to, and we'll soon see what the Gemara had. The Gemara has three options what you should do. Now, the three options that the Gemara is going to say is, so again, let's talk about the second day of Sukkot. No, let's not talk about the second. Let's talk about the third day of Sukkot. The third day of Sukkot, which in Israel is the second day of Chol HaMoed, and outside of Israel, it's the first day of Chol HaMoed. That day, what do you say in the Musaf Shemona Esrei? So the three options would be, well, you skipped day 2, and this third day of Sukkot is a doubtful, possible that it's really day 2. So maybe do day 2. Option number B is, well, it's the third day of Sukkot, second day of Chol HaMoed, but it's the third day of Sukkot. You should do day 3, like they're doing in Israel. In Israel, they're doing day 3. Do day 3. So we have option A is day 2. Option B is do day 3. And then option C is do 2 and 3. Now, in Israel, what did they do? In Israel, they only do 3 because it's the third day of Sukkot. There's no questions. Third day of Sukkot. Outside of Israel, on the one hand, it's the third day of Sukkot. On the other hand, it's a questionable if it's a second day of Sukkot. And we also skipped day 2 on the second day of Sukkot because it was Yom Tov, and you don't want to disgrace Yom Tov by reading like this is the second day of Sukkot and it's not the holiday, even though we're celebrating the holiday. So it would have been a little disgraceful to Yom Tov to read about the second day of Sukkot, because we're acting as if it's Yom Tov, it's the first day of Sukkot. So on the second day of Sukkot, we never did day 2. So there's reason to maybe say day 2. It was never done. We couldn't do it on day 2. And today is even a question if it might be day 2, at least the way in our tradition, we consider it questionable if it's day 2. And so therefore, maybe you should do day 2. On the other hand, it's the third day of Sukkot, we should do day 3. And then you always have plan C, or option C, and that's do both. And that is the Gemara outside. Now let's read it inside. Let's learn it inside. Va'anan. But let me tell you again where we are. We're 4 lines up from the bottom of page 55a. Va'anan de islan trei yomi. And us that have, let me close this share screen. Okay. Va'anan de islan trei yomi. And us that have 2 days of Yom Tov. Heichi of Dinon. How do we do the Musaf recital? Meaning outside of Israel, what do you do? Abaye Yomar, Abaye says, Sheni Yidacha. Let's push off Yom Sheni. Let's just forget about it. Why? Because on the second day of Sukkot, you couldn't say Yom Sheni. It was Yom Tov. It wouldn't have been right for Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, to read something about the second day of Yom Tov and imply like it's not a holiday, and we're celebrating it as a holiday, and we don't want to disgrace that, degrade the importance of the Yom Tov, the holiness, and the disrespect the Yom Tov. So we're not going to do day 2 then. And now the day afterwards is really day 3 of Sukkot. And even though it's questionable if it's day 2, but the fact is it is the 3rd day of Sukkot, and in Eretz Yisrael they're doing day 3. So Abaye says just skip out day 2 and don't read that part, that section in the Musaf of Yom Tov of the holiday of Sukkot. You just end up skipping out day 2, and which is I guess somewhat logical. You know, it's we should have done it on the second day, and we didn't. So we'll just skip it out, and now it's already the 3rd day. Then Rava says, no, Shvi Yidacha. Let's push away the 7th day sacrifices. In this way, on the 3rd day of Sukkot outside of Israel, read the 2nd day, which you had skipped on the 2nd day. So just read this day 2 for day 3. And day 4, do read the sacrifices of day 3. On day 5, read the sacrifices of day 4. And ultimately on day 7, read the sacrifices of day 6. And then you miss out of the day 7 sacrifices. We'll skip it out. Why? Because we did miss out day 2, and we want to recite it. And each of these days is questionable if it's the day before. So do the day, do it in the order that it's supposed to be. We read the day 1. We read it twice, actually, on the 1st day and 2nd day. Now on the 3rd day, we'll read day 2. We're not skipping anything. We're going to read day 2, and because of course the 3rd day is questionable if it's day 2, and in the 7th day it's questionable if it's day 6. So we're going to read day 6 on the 7th day, and we'll end up losing out the 7th day, which is the final day of Sukkot. We'll end up losing out, not reciting the sacrifices of the 7th day, according to Rava. According to Abaye, you end up leaving out the sacrifices. A recital of the sacrifices of the 2nd day, but that's Abaye. According to Rava, you end up leaving out the sacrifices, the recital of the sacrifices of the 7th day. And now the Gemara says, doesn't mention the 3rd option yet, but before we get to the 3rd option, it says this is very similar to the Gemara that we just learned when we were talking about Rav Acha and his opinion we're proving it wrong, we mentioned that you have all the songs of each day from Chol HaMoed, the first day of Chol HaMoed, all the way till the final day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, Shana Rabbah. And we mentioned all of those songs. And we said that if Shabbos falls in one of them, then what do you end up doing to that song that was supposed to be sang on that day? So Tanya Kavasei de Rava, the Gemara says we have a brisa that goes like Rava says. Imchal Shabbos lias b'echad mehen. If Shabbos falls on one of them, so what do? You want to do the right order of the songs. On the other hand, Shabbos messed you up because it took away, it knocked off the song of that day. So if Shabbos falls on the third day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and you can't sing the song for the Sukkot third day because you're doing the Shabbos song during the Musaf. So what do? Stick to your order. Keep the same order. Don't miss anything. You missed yesterday, do it today. You missed 2 days ago, make it up yesterday and go in the right order. Don't skip anything. The last day, you lose out, you leave out. Yimaitu yidacha. Yimaitu was the final day of Sukkot, Musaf songs, is Yimaitu. And sometimes if Shabbos falls on one of those days, you have to just lose out that final day because we're not messing up the order. You always have to go from the beginning and do each one properly. Do not skip any of them. Go in the right order. If you don't finish, don't worry. Leave out the last day. The last day, as long as you go in the right order. That's very similar to Rava, who says here that when it comes to Sukkot, keep to your order. The first day and the second day, you did both for the you read the recital of day one of Sukkot. So now on the third day, do day two of Sukkot and go in the right order. Push off the last one as you'll lose out. You'll leave out one of them. Yeah, you're gonna leave out the final day of Sukkot. You'll leave out day 7. Shvi'i Yidacha. So that fits very similar to this idea of the songs that the Yimaitu Yidacha, that Yimaitu is pushed off. That's the final song of Sukkot, and that was the one that gets pushed off. And now comes the third option. Askin Ameimar b'neherdah medalge deluge. A Meimar established in Neherdah, which is outside of Israel, it's in part of Babylon, that medaleg deluge, that you jump backwards, meaning go back and do the second day. In addition, do also the third day. So we are medaleg deluge, which the Gemara means, medaleg means to jump, but what it means is jump backwards. A jump backwards means go do the second day and do the third day. And what that basically means, and this is the halacha, is that the way you say the musaf is you recite both. So on the third day of Sukkot, which is the second day of Chol HaMoed, you're going to say V'yam Hasheni V'yam Hashlishi. Now, interestingly enough, I see on the side of my Gemara, I see on the sometimes you could look at the letters. It says the letter, which normally tells you where it says this in halacha. It puts it on the letter on the Shvi'i Yidacha. I don't know if in your Gemara it's that way, but that sounds surprising. I would think that it would say it, and it would have a letter, small letter on top of the Medalge Deluge, and there it would bring us to the Shulchan Aruch, that you're Medalig Deluge, because as far as I know, that's the final halacha, that's what we do, Medalig Deluge. Surprised that the Gemara, the letter, which gives you a little hint of what's the what's the minhag, or what's the halacha. Normally it would say it on the final halacha. That's interesting. It puts a letter on top of Shvi'i Yidacha. So let me just pull up over here in Shulchan Aruch. The first day of Chol HaMoed, it says, you read of Yom HaSheni, of Yom HaShlishi. And you have to say Manchasam in between. Now, even if you don't mention the psukim, you do fulfill the mitzvah. And if you make a mistake and you mention the psukim of a different day, if you didn't finish the bracha, you should say over the psukim. If you finish the bracha, you do not need to go back if you said the wrong day. Interesting. That's a interesting halacha. Now, so this is the halacha about Shmona Esrei, about the Musaf Shmona Esrei. Now Rashi here brings down. So anyway, bottom line is that's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. I'm surprised that in the Gemara it has a little letter above the Shvi'i Yidacha instead of on top of the Medalge Deluge. But the halacha seems to be the Medalge Deluge, and that's that's what we do. Rashi here brings that the same issue applies during Kriyas HaTorah. When you read the Torah, there's going to be a different reading in Eretz Yisrael or in Chutz La'aretz. And in Chutz La'aretz, what do you read on Sukkot? So Rashi brings down that this discussion really applies to that reading. And where does it mainly apply? It applies to the maftir, the final aliyah, or the achron, on Chol HaMoed, we read 4 aliyahs. We call up 4 people to the Torah on Chol HaMoed. So that means there's 1 extra than on a regular weekday of reading the Torah, because on a regular weekday or on Shabbos Mincha, you call up 3 people to the Torah reading. And on Chol HaMoed, you call up 4 people. And the 4th aliyah, that extra aliyah, is when you really want to do the day's sacrifices. So what do you do during that aliyah? So think about it. If it's the 3rd day of Sukkot in Eretz Yisrael, it would be very simple. Do the 3rd day of Yom HaShlishi. On the 3rd, you read about the 3rd day sacrifices. What about outside of Israel? It's the 3rd day of Sukkot, which means it's the 1st day of Chol HaMoed, and it's outside of Israel. What are you going to read? Well, what are you going to do in the Musaf? In the Musaf, you're going to do Uvayom Hasheni, Uvayom Hashlishi, like the Gemara has as the 3rd option, that you do 2. You do the 2nd day and the 3rd day. You skipped the 2nd day, by the way, the day before, because it was Yantiv. Now you're in the Musaf, you're going to say the 2nd day and the 3rd day on the third day of Sukkot. So in the Torah reading for the last aliyah, what do? You do the 2nd day and the 3rd day, not like in Israel where you only do the 3rd day for the final aliyah. In outside of Israel, you do the 2nd day and the 3rd day. You read about their sacrifices on the final aliyah of that 3rd day of Sukkot. You've been medaleg, the medalge, daluge. Jump back and do the 2nd day and the 3rd day, and this way you don't miss any of them. Yes, Jeffrey?
It's even more complicated because you have 4 aliyahs.
Right. So Rashi deals with that. Rashi really says you could read whatever you want on the other aliyahs. The main thing is the final aliyah. Do whatever you want. But he says, but the minhag of his, Rashi brings the minhag of, what does he say? The minhag of his Rebbeya, maybe? Noyagim Rabbeisai. The minhag of my teachers. Yeah, that's what Rashi says. The minhag of my teachers is the 2 first aliyahs. You do the 2 thoughts of what this day is. It might be the 2nd day. It might be the 3rd day. So we do both. We do the first aliyah gets day 2, the second aliyah gets day 3, and then the third aliyah you do the tomorrow's reading, which would be day 4, and then for the final aliyah, which is what we were talking about, you do both day 2 and day 3. Again, this is the third day of Sukkot. It's the first day of Chol Hamoed, but it's the third day of Sukkot, and you're reading day 2 and day 3, and it makes sense because it's questionable if it's day 2, and it is day 3. So you're doing both, and that's the final aliyah, is where you're bringing out what what the real sacrifices are of this day. Of course, you need to have other aliyahs so you could read other stuff. And Rashi initially says you can do whatever you want in the other aliyahs, but for the final aliyah, make sure to read that portion of 2 and 3. And there are other shitas and other ways of learning this Gemara, but it seems to boil down to the same thing. In other words, there's a way of learning this Gemara that it's not talking about the musaf sacrifices, it's talking about the reading of the Torah. So you can learn the Gemara that way as well. That as Rashi says, the Gemara is talking about musaf sacrifice, the musaf recital. And once you know about the musaf recital, it also should apply to the Torah reading. But the Gemara is talking about the musaf recital. It happens to be, it'll apply to the Torah reading. Other commentaries say, no, the Gemara is talking about the Torah reading. Then, naturally, maybe that would apply to the musaf recital as well. But the Gemara's main issue is the Torah reading. So there are different Rishonim who the Rishonim learn differently. There is also another different minhagim about how to, as Jeffrey was bringing up, how do you how do you divide the other aliyahs? Again, Rashi said you could do whatever you want, and then he says my Rebbeim did it this way, which is actually the way we do it. Today we do on day 3 of Sukkot, you would do for the aliyahs, the 4 aliyahs. First aliyah is day 2, second aliyah is day 3, third aliyah is day 4, and the final aliyah, aliyah 4, you do day 2 and day 3. That's which is the way Rashi mentions his Rebbeim did it. That is what we do. Okay, so that basically concludes this Gemara, and I guess it brings a little awareness to the fact that if you do travel to Eretz Yisrael, make sure to use a new siddur. Make sure they have a siddur that has the information for Eretz Yisrael in it. Otherwise, you will possibly recite the Chutz La'aretz tradition instead of the Eretz Yisrael tradition. And the same thing is for reading the Torah. Make sure you know, if you're someone who reads the Torah, make sure you know that there's a difference there. Yes, Jeffrey.
I was just going to say that's the reason why if you make a mistake, it's okay, because first of all, they didn't all have siddurim. And most of our history, we didn't have printing, and we didn't have siddurim. So if you could calculate that, you remember, the first day is 14, then the next day is 13, etc., whatever it is. The first day is 13 animals, so you might be able to remember. Okay, so the animals are going to be fewer every day, so you can remember it by heart. But otherwise, you just have to do what you know, and you sort of summarize.
Right. So what you're saying is the rabbis had mercy on the people, and practically they couldn't make you repeat Shemona Esrei because a lot of people probably would make mistakes, and therefore the rabbis didn't obligate you to repeat Shemona Esrei. That could be, I don't know what in other words, there could be the reason is that you're not obligated to say the sacrifices. All you have to do is mention in your musaf that they would bring sacrifices for this special day. And the fact that you mentioned the sacrifice, that's extra, that's additional, and you might have made a mistake with the sacrifice, it doesn't matter. You mentioned that they bring sacrifice on this day, that's the most important thing, and that's good enough. So I don't know if it's specifically because they didn't have Siddurim. It could be that it's, that it's more based on the fact that all you need to do is mention that like it says in the Torah, that they would bring sacrifices. It could be that's the reason. But yeah, shkoyach, okay. We're now turn the page to 55b, and we have a new Mishnah here. And in order to understand this Mishnah, you have to keep in mind a few points. Number one, that there were 24 mishmaros of koyanim. That means that they divided all the koyanim into 24 groups. We learned this in Tainus or in Chagiga. We had this, we learned about the division of how the Gemara in Tainus, I believe, that talked about the Moshe Rabbeinu, and it was divided. At one point, it was divided into 8, not 24. It wasn't always divided into 24, but anyway, ultimately, it got divided into 24 groups of Kohanim. And these 24 groups of Kohanim would have a week every year. Every year, they would have their week, and they would travel to Eretz Yisrael, and they would be able to to do the service. What happened on holidays? On holidays, you'd have basically two what would I say? Two things going on at the same time. You'd have the group that's supposed to be doing it this week. They do the weekly, daily sacrifices, the regular sacrifices of the week. And then the entire family of Kohanim are eligible to participate in the holiday sacrifices. So there's the regular sacrifices that were brought. That's for the weekly group called the Mishmar of that week. And the extra sacrifices, that was for the entire family of Kohanim. They were eligible to participate. And the thing is that in the holiday sacrifices, there seems to the rabbis wanted everyone to have an opportunity, have a share. All the Kohanim should participate. And so each family was given one sacrifice. So we went through in other words, each a group of 24 groups, they all had an opportunity to bring one of the sacrifices of that day. So we tried to include everyone. Now, as Jeffrey mentioned, each of the bulls of the holiday of Sukkot, they would start off with 13 on the first day, 13 bulls, but then on the second day, there were only 12. And on the next day, there was only 11. And so what ended up happening was the amount of sacrifices were less, but the amount of mishmaros were the same. So there was always 24 mishmaros, but then we kept on getting less and less sacrifices. So the Mishnah is going to tell us how did they divide up the mishmaros versus the sacrifices. So we're going to need to calculate how many sacrifices there were, how many additional offerings there were, how many mishmaros there are. We know are 24. And we're going to figure out which mishmaros, how it went, how it worked. And this way gave like opportunity for everyone to be part of it. Yes, David.
This is a lot of animals. What if they couldn't afford it? Like, was there ever a time that they couldn't afford to bring all those animals? The animals are expensive. I imagine a bull is a lot of money.
Right.
And, yeah.
The thing is, we're not talking about the Kohanim bringing these animals. We're talking about the entire Jewish people. This is from the entire Jewish people world, and they all gave their half a shekel. It all went towards these sacrifices. So it wasn't like some individual, having a bad, struggling in business. This is we're talking about the entire Jewish people giving us half a shekel, and it added up to a substantial amount of money.
Okay.
So that's really the discussion here in the Mishnah, is how they divided up these sacrifices of Sukkot. So let's begin the Mishnah. Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag, on the first day of Sukkot, Hayu Sham Shloisha Aser Parim. There were 13 bulls, Elim Shnaim, 2 rams, the Sawyer Echad, and 1 sin offering, 1 goat. Sawyer is a goat. And so altogether, there's 13 plus 2 plus 1. How much is that? 13
16.
plus 2 plus 1 is 16. And you also had 14 sheep. So Nishtairu Sham Arba Asar Kvasim, you have 14 sheep. L'shmoina mishmaros, for the final 8 mishmars. What does that mean? we have 16 sacrifices plus 14 sheep after. Also sacrifices, but we seem to divide these into two groups. We've got the bulls, the ram, and the goat. And then, in addition to those, you have 14 sheep. So we make sure we got to give one animal to each of the mishmaros. We have 16 of these initial animals, and we have 24 groups of kohanim. So we got rid of 16 of these groups of kohanim. Now we've got 8 more groups of kohanim, 8 more mishmars, and there's 14 sheep. So how do we divide up the sheep? How do we work that? So very simple. You have 14 sheep, and you got 8 mishmars left. So we divide these sheep into these, some of them are going to get doubles. Some of them are going to get 2 sheep. So it says, B'yom Rishon, on the first day, Shisha Makriven Shnayim Shnayim. We've got 6 of these groups of mishmars. 6 of the mishmars, they bring 2. They get an opportunity to have 2 sheep. And Vasha'ar Echad Echad. And the other mishmars, meaning the other 2 mishmars, they only bring 1 sheep. They each get 1 sheep each. So a few people, a few families got 2. How many? 6. 6 of the families, 6 of the mishmar families, 6 of the mishmars, I should say, got double, got the 2 sheep, and the others got 1 sheep each. Now, if you have 6 times 2 is 12, and the other plus 2 is 14. That's the 14 sheep. So 6 of them got extras. Okay, now comes the second day of Sukkot. B'yom Sheni, on the second day of Sukkot, Chamisha, what do you have? So keep in mind that each day of Sukkot, we need more sheep because we have 1 less bull. Every day it gets less. So like the first day of Sukkot, we had 16 animals of sacrifices that we were able to give to 16 mishmars. But on the second day of Sukkot, we only have 15 animals. So we can only give it to 15 mishmars. So we got 1 extra mishmar every day. So the first day we had 14 animals, and we were able to distribute them among the 8 mishmars that were left. On the second day of Sukkot, we're going to have these 14 sheep, but we're going to have to distribute them not to 8 mishmars, but to 9 mishmars. And on the third day, we've got the 14 sheep, but we've got to distribute them to 10 mishmars. So each day there's going to be less mishmars getting double. And then ultimately, on the final day of Sukkot, which would be on the 7th day, because the 8th day is Shmini Atzeres, on the 7th day of Sukkot, you would end up with 14 sheep divided into 14 mishmars. So each one would get 1. So that's the way it worked. The first few days of Sukkot, the first days until the last day, there was always someone getting more than 1. There was always 1 mishmar or more than 1 mishmar getting a double, getting 2 sheep or 2 sheep. And then the final day of Sukkot, before Shmini Atzeres, that's when you had some people getting, that's when you had the final day is when everyone just got 1 animal. Every mishmar got 1 animal. Okay, now let's go through each day. So on the second day, you got 9 mishmars that you need to give sheep to, because there's 1 bull less on the second day. So B'yom Sheni is Chamisha Makriven Shnayim Shnayim. You have 5 mishmars that are able to get 2 sheep. Vasha'ar, and the rest of the mishmars, Echad Echad, they each get 1 sheep. And B'yom Shlishi, on the third day, we have Arba'a Makriven Shnayim Shnayim. We need to give 14 sheep to 10 mishmars on this day. And so we have 14 sheep, we got 10 mishmars. So 4 of them, 4 Makriven Shnayim Shnayim, get double, get 2 sheep. Vashar, and the other mishmars, Ashar is Echad Echad, they bring 1 sheep each. B'yom Revi, on the 4th day, so on the 4th day, we have 14 sheep and we need to give 11 mishmars. Again, we keep getting we keep needing to provide for another mishmar because there's one less animal on each day because the bulls kept getting less. In fact, the bulls are 70 bulls altogether. And the reason they keep getting less is because it symbolizes the nations of the world that are ultimately going to be destroyed. And only the Chasidei Umes Ha'olam, only the righteous of the nations of the world are going to stay around for the coming of Mashiach. And the nations of the world in general are going to be destroyed. And so that's why they keep getting less and less. Now, so on the fourth day, we've got 14 sheep and we need to provide for 11 mishmars. So what do? So we've got shloisha makrivin shnayim shnayim. 3 of them could bring doubles. Can be bashar echad echad. The rest only bring 1 each. B'yam chamishi on the 5th day is shnayim makrivin shnayim shnayim. 2 of them bring doubles. 2 of them get 2 sheep and two mishmars. Bashar echad echad. The rest get 1 sheep each. B'yam shishi on the 6th day is echad makriv shnayim. Only 1 mishmar gets to bring 2 sheep. Bashar and the rest, echad, they bring 1 sheep. And the final day, b'yom shvi'i, is kulan shavin. Every mishmar is equal. They all get 1 sheep. So you had all of the earlier mishmars were able to bring an animal, either a bull or a ram. And then the final mishmars, the final 14 mishmars, were able to each get 1 sheep. So altogether, you've got 24 mishmars and 24 animals, and each one got 1 animal. We're going to stop here. We're up to Shmini Atzeres. We'll stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, please send in your request for the tractate. I sent out an email. I think you got it, about the different tractate options that I thought of. Of course, there's more than what I mentioned, more tractates. I just thought these were of interest, and therefore I gave you maybe about 6 or 7 options. I don't know. So if you got the email, great. Please send back your 3 choices. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Also, I did some of the research about, reading from the Torah. We should have a discussion sometime, because I think that they didn't read as much as we read.
Right. Yesterday you were going to do that research.
So
good.
The Mishnah never says, the first Mishnahs at the end of Megillah that talk about reading, never says we only says how many people read each day, and that how much each person has to read. If they read 3 psukim, it's good, and if they read 4, they're especially praiseworthy. Okay. So the truth is that I think that represents the original, and also they keep mentioning that people came in and out, and that's why they had everybody say a bracha, because originally only the first person said the first bracha, the last person said the last bracha.
The last bracha.
Right. So it became too confusing for people because the people couldn't sit around, they couldn't stay that long. They were doing their work, so they would come in. Some would come in, some would go out. And so they made a rule: you can never read fewer than 3 psukim for 1 person.
Right.
Okay, and then with Haftarah, they also made a rule, and so it looks like originally that you had 7 aliyahs on Shabbos, so that the minimum would have been 21 sentences, and if everybody was capable to read 4 sentences, they would say that would be praiseworthy. And if the paragraphs worked out right, you didn't stop in the middle of a subject or start a new subject with only 2 psukim. So then theoretically you could get away with 7 times 4, okay, which would be 28 verses. And I think that's much more realistic about what they used to read originally. Then later on, then when they had more Sifrei Torah and
So I hear what you're saying. The only thing I would say is that you might want to look up in the commentaries of the Rambam, where he talks about the minhag of finishing the entire Torah every year. And then he mentions that there was a unpopular minhag to finish the Torah every 3 years. And the question that we were sort of wondering, that was going on in our discussion yesterday was, so it sounds from the Rambam that the vast majority of people did it finished every year, and it was more like a unpopular custom, maybe every 3 years. And the way you said it was maybe a lot of places didn't do even that, or maybe it was more popular than the Rambam implies. So we wanted to like look up maybe in the commentaries of the Rambam, if there were any other minhagim, or if it was, or did this start somewhere later on? As the Rambam makes it like this is the official rule, you finish every year, the Torah. So, and it also fits with the rule of Shnayim Mikra v'Echad Targum as well. Like, that also seems to have to fit with this idea of you have to finish your parshios with the tzibur. When did that kick in? It must have been, it fits with this idea. If it was unpredictable what they were going to read in the shul, then how did you know how much to prepare for your Shnayim Mikra? In other words, it could be they're going to read 28 psukim, or 3 times 7, 21. I don't know, whatever. And or if there's if there's a maftir, 3 times 8, 24 psukim. But how do you know how? Maybe the guy's going to read it 20 psukim each person, and so they'll finish. So the Shnayim Mikra law also would be connected to this. How do you know what they're up to? What
right.
they're going to do?
I didn't see anybody discuss that, but Steinsaltz even as a note, he summarizes each chapter, and you can read the English note. And he says,
maybe send it to me. Maybe send it to me if you take a picture and maybe just text it or email. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff.
But I'm very fascinated by this because we really expect people to sit a long time now, and I know they don't all pay attention. They can't. Right. And then we have Torah readers who read very fast.
Right.
Okay, and you can't keep the place. Okay, and no less understand what's being read.
Right.
And they used to interrupt to translate. And this is also, it said there were differences. The places that translated, you could do it this way and etc. But you still couldn't go more than 3 sentences without translating. So
anyway, we have to look up the historical background to these, to this. All right. Sei gesund, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.